Johnny was the kind of average American teenager who could recite the Pokédex entries of his favorite legendaries faster than he could do his algebra homework. On a rainy Saturday, he settled onto the couch with a bowl of cereal and the biggest grin when Name That Legendary flickered across the TV. The show was loud, silly, and a little nostalgic. It was exactly what Johnny needed. Between rounds, an ad rolled. It was for a shiny new Pokemon cereal coming out in a few weeks called Legendary Loopies. The box was an explosion of color, rimmed with tiny Pokeball-shaped loops and pictures of Reshiram, Zekrom, Lugia, and other towering legendary figures grinning like mascots. The voiceover promised flavors in every bite and a collectible spoon. Johnny didn't think twice. He pre-ordered the limited early access box almost instantly on his phone because, honestly, who could resist the orange creamsicle loop? Johnny had been waiting for weeks. The send-off email still glowed on his laptop screen, reading early access. Legendary Loopies will arrive first to our earliest fans. When the cereal arrived in the afternoon, which was a bright box covered in glossy art of Reshiram, Zekrom, Lugia, and other cool legends, Johnny could barely keep his hands off it. He put the box on the counter, snapped a picture for his future cereal collection, and hid it in the cupboard like it was treasure. The next morning, sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, Johnny poured a bowl of Legendary Loopies and found them delightfully poppy, fruity, and surprisingly, with the orange creamsicle pieces tasting just like summer. He used the included spoon, which had a tiny Reshiram silhouette on the handle, and licked milk from the corners of his lips between bites. It felt like a special secret, like he'd unlocked an extra level in childhood. That night, he went to bed thinking about rare candies and naming all the legendaries he had seen on TV. A few days later, while the adult world hummed along oblivious, Johnny's world began to shift before his eyes. At first, the changes were small and awkward. Midway through a history study session one night, Johnny had suddenly scarfed down an entire family-sized pizza and still tinkered in the kitchen for snacks, only to feel normal again 5 minutes later. He shrugged the first time off as stress eating. Then, at odd hours at night, he found himself booting up his old Nintendo DS and spending hours in Pokemon Black and White, lingering at the screen whenever Reshiram appeared. It felt like a warm nostalgia tug, but deeper, it was as if his attention was being pulled toward one particular figure on the screen. Soon physical signs crept in too. At first, it was tiny flecks, a faint fuzz along Johnny's forearms that looked like someone had brush flour across his skin. Over the next hours, the white fuzz thickened, soft and solid like the beginnings of a snow-dusted coat. Then his voice, when he practiced trivia into his phone, sometimes came out with an odd, musical trill, which was more like a calling sound rather than a sentence. He laughed it off as stress or a sugar high. That night, he set his toothbrush on the sink, yawning, and fell asleep as a teenager should, until morning. The next day, morning light spilled across his bedroom. Johnny yawned and rolled over. He felt larger, heavier, and somehow fuller around the chest and shoulders before he opened his eyes. When he finally woke up, groggily stumbled to the bathroom and reached for his toothbrush. His fingers awkwardly fumbled the handle. Claws, not fingers, wrapped around the plastic handle of his toothbrush. The skin on his knuckles was furry and white. Panic rose fast and hot. Although he didn't want to, Johnny forced himself to look into the mirror, and his jaw just about hit the floor when he saw what looked back at him. Where a teenage boy should have stared back was a majestic, white-furred, blue-eyed form. Sleek, feathered wings folded behind shoulders that were broad, not menacing, but impossibly grand for a human frame. His face had the soft, streamlined beak and noble curve of a dragon, and his mouth opened not with words, but with a long, rolling cry that vibrated the glass. For a second, Johnny tried to speak. What? I'm Reshiram? A legendary? No way. This has to be a dream, right? I'm sure I'm still asleep. This must just be a bad dream. I know I'll wake up any moment now. This just can't be real. To himself, he sounded like his old voice in his head, but to the world, he came out in legendary calls and chromatic hums. Johnny pinched himself until he felt the sting. He wasn't dreaming. He was very awake and had inexplicably transformed into a Reshiram. For a moment, terror was a cold thing in his chest, and then curiosity prickled right next to it. Before Johnny could process anything, the front door burst open. Several kids from school filed in, laughing. One was clutching a phone with an excited glow. "Yo, our Poke radar lit up, and the app is showing a Reshiram right here." One squealed. "Dude, we can capture it." Another bellowed, already fishing a Master Ball from a pocket like it was the most casual thing on a Saturday morning. Johnny flapped his arms, awkward, powerful, and unfamiliar, and tried to speak. He attempted to shout, "Wait, stop, it's me, Johnny," but the only reply was an alarmed, majestic howl. By the time he processed their intent, a Master Ball was already arcing his way. To Johnny's friends from school, he wasn't Johnny anymore. He was a once-in-a-generation capture opportunity. Johnny made a run for it, and panic shoved him into motion. He barreled past them, knocking into a table, skidding through the living room while avoiding the thrown Master Balls, breathing heavy breaths that sounded like distant thunder. Being a legendary and trying not to get captured is very different from any late-night Pokemon battle Johnny had ever imagined. People screamed, phones recorded, and almost everyone who glimpsed him shouted, "There's a Reshiram! Capture it!" Pokeballs flew like confetti, pelting his flanks, thunking harmlessly off feathers, and failing with dramatic whines. Each near capture sent kids and trainers into a chorus of groans. Johnny learned fast. Being a legendary was exhilarating in cinematic ways and terrifying in practical ones. Every phone camera ping made his heart drop. People shouted strategies. Kids wept with excitement. Adults shouted orders. Johnny discovered how chaotic it was to duck through a movie theater. The velvet ropes snapped under his wingspan, and popcorn rained down like an embarrassed cloud. At one point, a teenage girl in a cosplay Misty jacket tried to hand him a sandwich. "Please take this," she said. Johnny, now Johnny the Reshiram, attempted an appreciative chirp and took the sandwich in an awkward claw, but upon trying to eat it, he found the bread tasted like cardboard and spit it out. He missed pizza. He missed toast. And most of all, he missed the simple smell of breakfast and a normal life that was now seemingly gone. When police sirens wove into the chaos, Johnny bolted, his heart hammering, fur brushing stone. The police arrived across the street with sirens yawning in the evening. He braced. The world felt smaller and more dangerous. He flattened his vast, feathered body against brick and hid in an alley, panting in a chorus of purrs and vocal trills, with breaths that felt like gusts, heart pounding in his new massive chest. Then a voice in the alley, soft, measured, and very far from panic, called, "Hey, over here. You'll be safe with us, I promise." The door that opened in the alley was a small, unexpectedly ordinary door. Inside, the lights clicked on and revealed two figures that made Johnny forget about fear for a beat. Lugia and Zekrom. Lugia was the first to move. She appeared like a living white gale, a smooth, silvery body shaped like a graceful sea creature with broad, wing-like fins that shimmered with faint blue underglow. Her eyes were calm and ocean-deep, and when she tilted her head, Johnny felt the faint scent of salt and storm. Zekrom contrasted like thunder. Broad-shouldered, matte black scales, electric coils along his spine that hummed with restrained energy. His eyes were sharp, charismatic, and bright as lightning. Where Johnny the Reshiram was graceful flame and white velvet, Zekrom was compact storm and taut muscle. For the first time since he'd transformed, Johnny felt understood. Their presence felt like standing between a storm and a calm ocean. Lugia's wings folded carefully as she spoke in a calm, human voice the way people do when they don't want to startle a child. "We've been monitoring the broadcast," she said. "You were the first. You're confused and scared. That's normal." Johnny responded, "What do you mean, the first? What on earth are you talking about? And why can I understand what you're saying?" He was stunned and strangely relieved. With them, his cries translated into clear words they could hear. People hear our voices as cries, Lugia explained in a soft, human-like voice. But to each other, we speak plainly. Your inside voice, speaks like a boy. Outside you cry like a legend. Lugia explained something that had seemed impossible. Pokémon can understand each other like beings of the same language, while humans interpret their cries as strange noises. Johnny gaped, then laughed, a sound like a halftime whistle that surprised him. Through them, he could explain the panic outside. They told him they'd been tracking a food company called Team Galactic Foods for weeks and had seen worrying signs. Zekrom's voice was a low rumble, skeptical and sharp. Johnny, we noticed the early order badges. Whoever made the cereal you purchased wanted to transform people. That's not natural. Lugia's soft eyes met Johnny the Reshiram. We believe the cereal you ate carried an experimental transformation reagent. It seems that someone wants to mass-produce it. She outlined a plan. We need the rest of your cereal box. There might just be a clue inside. That night, they snuck back to Johnny's house. In Johnny's kitchen cabinet, they found a half-eaten Legendary Loopies box, took it, and quickly returned back to the house in the alley, the trio's small and humble base of operations. Lugia rifled gently through the inner flaps and lifted a shiny square of print. A QR code, she murmured, scanning it with her Poképhone 25, a sleek device carried by legendaries, which were to life. The code revealed a private page on the screen for Team Galactic Foods. In dry, corporate prose lay a plan. Mass distribute a cereal prototype designed to induce transformations in children, coding the changed minds to respond to a central control node. Team Galactic Foods, thinly veiled under the friendly brand, intended to engineer a generation of young legendaries who would obey and enact a grab for control in an evil nationwide takeover scheme. Johnny felt used. The early access box was a mistake in the company's rollout, the site claimed. An 8B experiment. The one Johnny had consumed lacked the final mind control implant by accident, which was why his mind had remained his own even through the overwhelming change. Lugia's eyes hardened and her mouth tightened. They want to control and convert kids all over the country, which in legendary forms would give adults little resistance to them. She said, "You were transformed, but not controlled because your batch was a mistake. We cannot allow this to continue." Johnny's anger burned hotter than his new feathers, and he slammed his claws on the ground in rage. He had been a test case, turned into something majestic, and then hunted like an amusement. He wanted to shout, to call the company out in every forum and on every screen. Instead, he steadied, listening as Lugia and Zekrom started working on a plan to stop Team Galactic Foods before the cereal shipped nationwide. They told Johnny the plan would take a few days to fully figure out, so Lugia and Zekrom told Johnny to stay low profile during that time and return to the alley once they had come up with something. Johnny left, still angry, but a little calmer now that he knew the big truth, and tried to live a normal life like he had before the transformation, at least for a little while, although it was strange, awkward, difficult, and even a little funny being a legendary Reshiram after all. This is what he did during the next few days while he was waiting, with Zekrom handing Johnny his very own Poképhone 25 right before he left so they could keep in touch during that time and keep him up to date on the latest news. Human food refused Johnny the Reshiram. What had tasted like delicious pizza before now tasted like cardboard dough and stale plastic, and there was no way he was going to eat that. A fast food run became a diplomatic mission when the drive-thru attendant attempted to hand him a Happy Meal through the window, as Johnny still had an urge to eat fast food, despite his new form. He swooped the Happy Meal away like a snack-sized offering, but found the meal tasted like eating trash to him, which made him cry. The only things he could stomach were strange Pokémon gifts Lugia had cooked up for him, such as a glowing rare candy that felt like warmth in his belly, and a stew that smelled faintly of an ocean breeze and toasted marshmallow. He learned fast that being a legendary comes with very refined and inconvenient taste buds. The next day, Johnny's attempt at normalcy became comical when he tried to jump on his old Wii balance board to keep active as Johnny the Reshiram. The software screamed, "Please enter user statistics," and then politely labeled him, "Oh, that's obese," in a flashing warning when he stepped on because the game's sensors were not built to handle a legendary's mass and size. It said he weighed 2,025 pounds and 9 feet in size, and the game's comment made him feel larger than ever, but not in a good way. After an awkward and lonely session of modding the balance board with strings and duct tape, he finally got his profile to register, and then carefully played through Wii Fit Sports Resort in a crouch between wing beats while holding what was, to him, a small Wii remote while standing on the balance board. He laughed at himself afterward, thinking about how funny it was to make a game treat him like a human again, and also because it meant he still had a little ingenuity left. Then, on the roof of a grocery store, Lugia taught him how to ride wind currents gently. He learned the exciting feeling of stretching his wings and flying around, even if just for a short time, which was an amazing joy and wonder. Then, hiding on his roof at dawn, Johnny watched the sun curl over rooftops and realized he'd learned a new appreciation for quiet. Reshiram's majesty had taught him to respect small moments. A few days later, Johnny got a text message on his Poképhone 25 that said Lugia and Zekrom had finished the plan and needed him back at the alley house so they could discuss it together, and Johnny quickly flew there and entered the small house in the alley where his allies were waiting. The plan felt fragile and immediate. Infiltrate the plant, find the production line, and destroy the machines. While Johnny, Lugia, and Zekrom mapped a nighttime route, footsteps sounded at the door. A figure slipped into the lamplit room in a coat oddly like a scientist's lab coat and oddly like a fan-made uniform, all at once. Calm, thin, and impossibly composed. He introduced himself as N. N's voice was soft, precise, and oddly sincere. "You meddle in affairs you do not understand," he said, smiling with a confidence that had no trace of humor. Team Galactic's goal is not merely profit. We believe transformation can create a new balance. Children, turned into legendaries, would reshape society. Johnny the Reshiram, trembling in his chest, felt small. But why use kids? "What's wrong with you?" he cried and then yelled, human words folding into raspy, angry calls, and walked close enough that Johnny could see the meticulous calm on his face. Because children are beginnings. They are malleable, just like you. They will lead the change we need before the older minds can resist. Why wait for consent when you can create compliance? When Johnny jumped forward, an instinctive, furious leap, N barely flinched. Team Galactic security closed in, and the trio had to move now or lose the chance. They flew into the night under cover of fog and concrete. Zekrom peeled open a back conduit with a bolt of controlled lightning. Lugia blew a gale that sent alarms scrambling and dampened vibrations. Johnny felt the raw exhilaration of power, but also the sobering knowledge that he could not return to the life he loved until this was over. Johnny breathed a controlled flare that singed conveyors and melted circuitry without starting an inferno that would endanger innocent workers still trapped in the complex. It was terrifying to have that level of force in his limbs and not know the measure of it. In the end, they smashed vats, scattered crates of cereal, and shut down the mind control core, a machine of blinking lights and looping code that had the quiet smell of antiseptic, and escaped in a sleek jet, flipping the plant's security camera off with a final, chilling line as he soared away. "You have delayed us. You cannot defeat progress. There will be more opportunities." Johnny felt hollow for a moment. They had stopped the distribution, but he remained in Reshiram form. The destruction felt righteous yet incomplete. Johnny, Zekrom, and Lugia returned to Johnny's house under a sky rinsed clean by fight weather. Unfortunately, there was nothing in the plant to reverse a transformation that had already occurred, which made Johnny feel horrible. Before leaving, Zekrom and Lugia did something unexpected. They stepped toward Johnny's old Nintendo DS, the cartridge of Pokémon Black and White still inside. With a strange look and flash of energy, they folded themselves into a quiet form and slipped back into the game. "How did you do that?" Johnny managed, whispering to a console he'd won as consolation prize in a tournament 3 years ago. Lugia's voice came faint, the way distant waves sound. "We have our ways. You found us because we were watching you." They left with a promise of watching out for the future. "If N comes back," Zekrom rumbled, "we'll be near." That night, Johnny the Reshiram tried to sleep and found himself missing the simple things. Human hands, the weight of a backpack, and the embarrassment of school hallways. Exhausted, scared, and raw with feeling, Johnny laid down in his bed and let the enormity of the hours wash through him like rainwater through a gutter. He cried a waterfall of tears, not with the wildness of a legendary beast, but with the aching, human sorrow of a teenager who had watched his normal life get smudged like watercolor. He fell asleep exhausted, a teenager inside legend-sized fur, and dreamed of the cereal ad jingle, transformed into a taunt. He dreamed of N's voice. He dreamed of Lugia's eyes and Zekrom's crackling chuckle. When morning came, he hesitated to pry his lids open. After getting out of bed, Johnny shuffled to the mirror and braced himself for more white fur and deep blue eyes. Instead, he saw his own face. Relief rushed into him like a summer storm. He was Johnny the human again. When his friend from school knocked that afternoon and asked him to watch name that legendary, Johnny declined, saying, "I need a break from Pokemon." Johnny's friends respected his decision. Before they left, one of them announced that Legendary Loopies had been pulled from shelves and recalled. Team Galactic Foods project had been halted by the scandal of the plant attack. Johnny's stomach flipped. It was a weird comfort to know that no one else would be tested and that no more children would be transformed without consent. That night, Johnny sat on the porch with dinner warming beside him. The stars were pinpricks of quiet approval. He thought about the week's absurdities while he had been a Reshiram one more time, like a montage. Such as the day he tried a random piece of rare candy he had found, which had been too fizzy and made his teeth sparkle. The time a gaggle of teenagers misfired a master ball that had landed on his tail, making Johnny run away scared. How the Wii Balance Board had declared him obese, which he hacked while giggling through tears. He also remembered the fear of being hunted, of losing his identity, of a company that treated children like test subjects. That shadow stayed with him like a lesson, that excitement and consumer culture can hide risks, and that sometimes you need to look past flashy ads and check the small print. As the porch light haloed his plate, Johnny felt strangely grateful. He had been a legend, literally, and come back to being a boy. He had friends who loved him even if they had panicked, and 2 legendary allies who would always watch. He imagined a future where he might find a way to help more, and went inside. Somewhere, in the slow hum of the city, a note from N flickered. The old villain's promise, not a threat, but a promise of a story left unfinished. Johnny felt his pulse quicken, not with panic, but with a strange, adventurous readiness. He had the taste of orange creamsicle still on his tongue, the memory of wings and electricity warm in his bones, and a life that now included knowing the language of legends. He set his plate aside and turned off the porch light. In the window, his reflection smiled back as a boy who had been, for a terrifying and magnificent week, a legendary, and who, for now, was content to be Johnny.
The highway hummed under Ashton's car tires on that fateful day in 2015, like a tired engine trying to remember its purpose. Night had settled warm and thick over the American town he lived in, the kind of summer heat that made the air feel slow and heavy. He had finished a long shift at the Pokémon Center, bandaging a stubborn Growlithe's paw, calming a jittery Togepi, restocking shelves with healing potions. And all he wanted was a bed and the quiet that came with sleep. The dashboard clock glowed 2:14 a.m., and the world outside his windshield was a smear of sodium streetlights and distant neon. His phone buzzed against the console. The name on the screen was unfamiliar, Norton. Ashton answered on instinct, tired and polite. The voice on the other end was smooth and oddly persuasive, a voice that knew how to make a favor sound like a necessity. Norton said Professor Sycamore had stopped answering calls at his private lab. Norton claimed to represent Stardo's Galaxy Research, a company with deep pockets and deeper patience. He said the lab housed a revolutionary project, research worth salvaging. He said Ashton was the closest Pokémon Center worker, and therefore the obvious choice to check the place out. When Norton hinted he could pull strings and cost Ashton his job if he refused, the choice narrowed. He told himself he would be home before dawn. He did not know how literal Norton's promises would become. The lab sat half-hidden behind a stand of pines, its facade glass and steel, lights dark except for a single blinking security beacon. Norton's GPS coordinates led Ashton to a side entrance with a keypad and a sticker advertising a new app, PokéLab Decoder. Ashton installed the app on his phone and activated it, and the app unlocked the door with a soft chime. The air inside smelled of ozone and old coffee, of antiseptic and something sweeter, an undercurrent of chemicals and the faint metallic tang of machines that had been waiting. The lobby was a museum of halted ambition. Display cases with prototype Pokeballs, a wall of framed patents, a projector looping a promotional reel of a smiling Professor Sycamore. Ashton's footsteps echoed. He felt watched by the silence. He told himself again to be quick. He moved deeper into the lab, phone flashlight cutting through the dark. He found file cabinets, research logs, and then an empty cage with scorch marks on the floor. A whisper of movement made him freeze. He ducked into a locker and held his breath while a lone technician passed, muttering into a headset. The man's shadow fell across the locker door. Ashton's heart hammered against his ribs. The technician left and said, "Time for me to go home. I've been working too long." To himself, though Ashton, still hiding in the locker, heard him. Ashton exhaled and kept going. Ashton's world tilted in a way that had nothing to do with the building. He felt smaller, lighter, and then the phone in his hand seemed absurdly large. He laughed at himself, fatigue playing tricks, until he opened the camera app and the screen showed a face that was not his, a narrow snout, bright green eyes, a leafed tail curling behind a slender body. He was a Snivy. Panic came in waves. He fumbled with the phone, the touchscreen awkward under tiny, scaled fingers. He remembered Norton's offhand warning about strange effects, and realized with a cold clarity that he had been transformed the moment he crossed the lab threshold. He was not the only one. Voices echoed down a corridor, human voices but with a timbre that belonged to Pokémon. He followed them and found a Charizard in a cage, its wings folded, its eyes tired and human. The Charizard spoke in a voice that made Ashton's skin prickle. "Help me." "I am Professor Sycamore." The words were human, ragged with disbelief. Sycamore explained that Team Galactic, now operating under the alias Stardo's Galaxy Research, had come for his research. They had offered partnership, then betrayal. A drink that looked like coffee had been a trap. Sycamore had been turned into Charizard and imprisoned. Ashton's first instinct was disbelief, then anger, then a strange, practical calm. He had a mission: find the files Norton wanted and get out. He had a new body and new limitations. He had to adapt. The lab's innards were a maze of experiment rooms and storage bays. Ashton moved with a new kind of agility, slipping through vents and under tables. He was chased by a Pikachu that spoke in a sing-song voice and lashed out with sparks, its aggression inexplicable until Ashton realized the Pokémon could understand him now. His voice translated into cries and chirps by the strange physics of the transformation. He escaped by diving into a laundry chute and tumbling into a room that smelled of old paper and warm metal. There on a pedestal lay a device that made Ashton's breath catch. A Pokédata Master 1995, shaped like Reshiram and glowing with a soft, golden light. It hummed with stored knowledge, entries, schematics, encrypted files. He slipped it into his satchel. The device contained the missing research, coordinates, energy signatures, and a file labeled with a name that made his stomach drop: Legendary Project. He pocketed the Pokédata master and moved to find Sycamore. The deeper he went, the more he understood the scale of what had happened here. This was not a single betrayal, it was a program. Sycamore's cage was guarded by a single Team Galactic operative. Ashton used his small size to his advantage. He darted between the guard's legs, tripped him with a well-placed tail flick, and the man went down in anger as he was knocked unconscious from the fall. Ashton snatched the keys and unlocked the cage. The Charizard that stepped out was not the professor's body so much as the professor's mind given a new, terrible form. Still brilliant, still human in thought, but with the raw power of flame. Sycamore's gratitude was immediate and practical. He explained the Pokédata master's true value. It contained the location of a newly discovered legendary Pokémon, a being whose energy could be harnessed as a city-scale power source. Sycamore had intended to use it for good, to end energy scarcity. Team Galactic had other plans. They wanted control. They wanted to weaponize the legend. Ashton and Sycamore moved through the lab together, a strange pair. A small, cunning Snivy and a towering Charizard with a professor's voice. They avoided patrols, navigated test chambers that smelled of ozone and fear, and pieced together the timeline of the invasion. Team Galactic had infiltrated under the Stardo's name, promising funding and legitimacy. When Sycamore refused to hand over his research, they gave him a drink called a triple-shot espresso fire roast which he thought was just coffee, but found out too late after drinking it, transformed him, knocked him out, locked him up in a cage, and began harvesting data. They reached the lab's central atrium just as Norton stepped from the shadows. He wore a tailored suit and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Norton, then let the mask slip. He was N, the architect of Team Galactic's new face. His voice was soft and certain, the kind of voice that believed in destiny and the rightness of its own cruelty. You've done everything you were told like a good little Pokémon, Ashton. Now give me the Pokédata Master 1995. N's men moved like a tide. Ashton fought with the instincts of a Snivy, quick strikes, clever feints, while Sycamore in Charizard form became a furnace of controlled fury. The Pokédata Master changed hands in a scuffle. It skittered across the floor and landed at N's feet. He picked it up as if holding a key. Ashton lunged. N struck him down with a gloved hand, and the device slipped into N's grasp. For a moment, defeat tasted like metal. Then Sycamore's eyes found a glowing stone on a shelf, a Charizardite. With a tail that trembled from effort and hope, Sycamore rolled the stone into the cage. The Mega Evolution was not a spectacle, but a necessity. Sycamore became Charizard X, a storm of cobalt flame and renewed purpose. He broke free and unleashed a torrent of fire that scattered N's operatives. The battle turned. Ashton, still small and quick, darted between legs and claws, and together they forced N back. For a heartbeat, it seemed the night would end with the lab's liberation. N, however, was not a man who accepted defeat. He smiled, cold and certain, and triggered a self-destruct sequence. The lab's alarms began to wail. N fled like a shadow slipping through a crack, his escape a practiced choreography. He left behind chaos. Ashton and Sycamore ran, the building groaning around them. Fire licked at insulation and wiring, turning corridors into ovens. A falling beam pinned Ashton beneath a tangle of metal. He called out, voice small and human in a body that was not. Sycamore, with the strength of a Mega Charizard, lifted the debris and pulled Ashton free. They stumbled into the night as the lab collapsed behind them in a roar of flame and twisted steel. The sky was a smear of orange and ash. N's silhouette was already a memory, a dark shape disappearing toward a waiting jet. Outside, the world felt impossibly large and painfully small. The transformation that had bound them to the lab began to recede. The effects that had transformed Ashton and Sycamore into Pokémon were not permanent once they had escaped the lab's influence. As the first light of dawn bled into the horizon, they were human again, exhausted, singed, and alive. Professor Sycamore, took the Pokédata Master 1995 into his care. He promised Ashton it would be secured, studied, and protected from those who would use it for harm. He thanked Ashton with a warmth that was both professional and deeply human. They stood on a rise and watched the lab smolder in the distance. For a moment, Ashton thought he saw a legendary figure on a nearby hill, a white, majestic shape that turned its head toward the moon and then took to the sky. Reshiram, or a memory of it, glided away, a silent witness to the night's violence. Sycamore warned that Team Galactic would return. N's escape was not a failure but a promise. When Ashton finally drove home, the road was empty and the air smelled of rain and ash. He parked, climbed the stairs to his small apartment, and collapsed into bed. Sleep came like a tide, deep, dreamless, and necessary. Somewhere beyond the horizon, N plotted, and Team Galactic's shadow lengthened. The return of N was not a single event, but a slow, inevitable tide. Ashton had survived this night, but the future would demand vigilance, courage, and the kind of quiet resolve that comes from knowing you have faced something monstrous and lived to tell the tale. The dawn found him breathing steadily, the last embers of fear cooling in his chest. He would wake and go to work at the Pokémon Center, and the world would keep its ordinary rhythms. But the memory of the lab, the glow of the Pokédata Master, and the echo of a legendary's wings would follow him like a promise. The fight was not over, and the return of N had only just begun. In 2017, high above Earth, a gleaming silver ring drifted silently through low orbit. This was Galactic Station, the newest and most ambitious creation of Team Galactic. Inside its polished halls, alarms pulsed with a soft blue glow as N, the former leader of Team Galactic, stood before the new commander, Rockdom. He was a stern, sharp-eyed man who had defected from Team Rocket years earlier. N pleaded for one final chance. Twice he had failed to seize control of the world. Twice he had been stopped by unlikely heroes. But he insisted he could still lead Team Galactic to victory. Rockdom studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. I'll give you one more chance," he said. "And you better make it count." N bowed, gathered a squad of galactic soldiers, and descended to Earth with a plan more ambitious and more dangerous than anything he had attempted before. A day later, in a quiet American neighborhood near Pallet Town, Johnny, now a young adult, relaxed in his living room. The TV flickered with breaking news. An entire town, the nearby Pallet Town, had been transformed into Pokémon. People were wandering the streets as Pikachu, Eevee, and Matchop. They were confused, frightened, and unable to speak. Johnny's heart dropped. He knew this pattern. He knew this villain. He walked to his old Nintendo DS, still holding his Pokémon black and white cartridge. He whispered, "Lugia, Zekrom, N is back." The DS glowed. Light burst from the screen, and Lugia and Zekrom emerged into the room, just as they had years ago. They confirmed Johnny's fear. N had returned, and this time he wasn't targeting a single region. He wanted the entire world. "We can't stop him alone," Lugia said. "We need allies." She opened her Poké-tablet 26, scanning for humans who had survived N's past transformation schemes. 3 names appeared. First, there was Ashton, the Pokémon Center worker who survived Sycamore's lab incident. Then Professor Sycamore, brilliant and brave. And finally, Brocky, a gym leader who once fought Team Rocket and crossed paths with N long before anyone else. Johnny nodded. It was time to gather the team. Lugia and Zekrom combined their powers, transforming Johnny into Reshiram once more. With a mighty beat of his wings, he soared into the sky alongside his legendary partners. They found Ashton, Sycamore, and Brocky at Sycamore's lab. The reunion was emotional, especially when Ashton realized the mysterious Reshiram he once saw during his escape from Sycamore's lab had been Johnny all along. Sycamore handed Johnny a device he had invented. The Poké Talker, allowing Pokémon to speak human language. Johnny's voice echoed clearly through the lab. "We stop N together." But before they could plan further, the ground shook violently. A massive earthquake rippled across the region. Sycamore's monitors lit up with seismic readings. "N and Team Galactic have stolen the fire sphere," Sycamore said. "They've awakened Groudon." The team flew to a distant volcanic island where Groudon rampaged, spewing fire and magma. The sky glowed red. The earth cracked beneath their feet. N appeared briefly, smirking as he escaped with his guards. Johnny and his allies fought fiercely to calm Groudon. Working together, Reshiram's flames, Lugia's calming winds, Zekrom's thunder, and Brocky's tactical skill. They restored the fire sphere to its resting place deep within the volcano. Groudon settled, returning to dormancy. But N was already gone. He had gone back to Galactic Station. The team pursued N into orbit, boarding Galactic Station just moments before N activated its central weapon. A planet-wide transformation laser. A green beam of shimmering energy shot toward Earth. Every human on the planet transformed into a Pokémon, obedient, mind-controlled, and unable to resist Team Galactic. Everyone except the 6 heroes who had boarded the station just in time. "You have 5 minutes. N taunted. After that, the transformation becomes permanent." The battle erupted across the station. Johnny, Lugia, Zekrom, Ashton, Sycamore, and Brocky fought through waves of galactic soldiers. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. The station trembled. At the last possible second, Sycamore reached the control room and fired a blue reversing beam back at Earth. A brilliant flash washed over the planet. Humanity returned to normal, with no memory of what had happened. N panicked. He tried to flee, but Rockdom appeared furious. "You failed me for the last time, N. Maybe you'll finally be useful to me now. No more running for you, just hold still for a second and don't resist it." He activated Team Galactic's most powerful device, the Legendathon. The beam Rockdom shot out of the device struck N, transforming him into a legendary Pokémon capable of shifting between forms at will. He became Suicune, Rayquaza, Mewtwo, and more. With this new power, N overwhelmed the heroes one by one. Johnny and his allies collapsed, defeated. When they awoke, they were locked in cages. Rockdom stood proudly beside the transformed N. "You will all become starter Pokémon," Rockdom declared, "and I will trap you inside this Pokémon Black and White 3-game cartridge forever." But then, there was a ripple in space and a distortion in time. Palkia and Dialga suddenly appeared. With a single pulse of cosmic power, they shattered the cages and freed the heroes. N's transformation wore off. He was human again. Rockdom hadn't realized the Legendathon's effects were temporary. Desperate, Rockdom and N tried to escape, but there was nowhere left to run. The station began to collapse. Lights flickered. Gravity fluctuated. Johnny as Reshiram, Lugia, Zekrom, Sycamore, Ashton, Brocky, Palkia, and Dialga confronted Rockdom and N in the central chamber. Together, they formed a massive combined energy sphere. A swirling fusion of fire, water, electricity, psychic power, and cosmic force. Rockdom and N were struck, engulfed in light, and pulled into a pocket dimension, sealed away where they could never threaten Earth again. The station shook violently. It was falling out of orbit. "Get to the escape pods," Johnny shouted. They launched just in time. From a grassy hill on Earth, the heroes watched as Galactic Station crashed into the moon, exploding in a silent burst of silver and blue. Earth was safe. With the threat gone, Lugia and Zekrom gently transformed Johnny back into his human form. The world celebrated the fall of Team Galactic. Rockdom and N were gone forever, and the remaining Galactic members were arrested. Johnny thanked his legendary friends and his new allies, Ashton, Sycamore, and Brocky. Lugia and Zekrom returned to the Nintendo DS, offering Johnny a choice. Stay with us, Zekrom said. Live as Reshiram in the Pokémon world. Added Lugia. Protect it from within. Johnny thought long and hard. And accepted. He stepped into the DS, becoming Reshiram once more, a guardian of the digital Pokémon world. Ashton decided to leave his Pokémon Center job and work full-time with Professor Sycamore, who took in Johnny's DS and kept it stored safe in his lab. And Ashton helped Sycamore ensure no one could ever misuse Pokémon transformation technology again. Brocky returned to his gym, wiser and stronger. And the world moved forward, safe at last. The saga of N had ended. But the legend of Johnny, the boy who became Reshiram, had only just begun. So next time you play a Pokémon game and see a Lugia, Zekrom, and Reshiram flying by in the video game, you can rest safe knowing they are protecting future generations from harm and threats.